Hello, welcome to Books and Brews,
the place where beer and literature meet.
with your host, certified Cicerone Michael Agnew.
And Laura WahCHOOka, author of the Bluebells Chronicles.
Each month we invite a guest author to read their words and talk about writing while sipping beers specially paired with their work.
Today's guest is Frank Warner.
So sit back,
Pop a cold one,
and dive into some books.
And
Yeah, it won't. Go ahead. Welcome to Books and Brews, episode number 63. Laura, what has been happening in your month?
Well, we had an exciting month. We learned to cull chickens, which is a polite word for kill chickens. And or process, or everybody around here just says we took our chickens to freezer camp. So, yeah, what did you think of that whole process?
Well, it was bloody and gooey and messy and sometimes smelly. But other than that, we ended up with 10 very large chickens in the freezer because we raised Cornish crosses. They go from 0 to about 10 pounds in only about 8 to 10 weeks. And so it's very cost effective. You know, many chickens you would need to raise to at least 8 months or so before you'd really want to eat them, that they would have enough weight on them. So that's not so economical if you're feeding chicken feed to them all the time.
Right.
So,
and
yes,
we also had, I think we had 9 new rabbits and one of them died. So we have 8 little teeny tiny bunnies left. And anybody who wants to see those can go to our Facebook page, Glenmerrill Farms, GLENMIRRIL. And I'm posting lots of videos and pictures of adorable little rabbits from probably within hours of when they were born. And they were tiny and they were pink. And then bit by bit, their fur comes in.
they look like little rats.
So, yeah.
You know, or little pigs.
And
It's
other
really
than that, I kind of got an addiction for myself this month. This is called, what does that say? Amish Good Health, I think. Yoder's Good Health Recipe. So we have an Amish store about 25 minutes from us in Virginia. And I just grabbed this one day because it promised me it was going to put a pep in my step and do all this phenomenal stuff. And I first tasted it, and it's made with apple cider vinegar and a bunch of herbs, and you do not want to drink this stuff straight. But I put it in a half water, half Celsius drink and add this, and oh my gosh, I can't stop drinking it. So by this time next month, I'm going to be like a super soldier or something. I'm going to be so healthy.
And it's not like the Vita Vita Vegemin from, Lucille Ball way back when, where she got trashed while she was doing all of the PSAs. There's no alcohol in this.
Yeah.
It's just apple cider vinegar.
Speaking of your question before we started as to, do I ever end up a little tipsy by the end of this? Have you read anything this month?
Well, mostly books on quantum chemistry and computing, as is my usual. So I will forego putting the audience to sleep with those and shift right to the things you may have read, Laura.
Yeah, this is about all I read this month, which is good because we're interviewing the author. So this is Tumbleeweed Forts, and I have to confess, between new rabbits and learning to cull and freeze chickens, it's been a really busy month. So I skimmed / read most of it today. So on the bright side, it's all very fresh in my mind. So,
well, I suppose I have one more highlight in that this last month I became an official Kentucky Colonel.
yes.
And I'm even wearing the official logo polo for it as well.
You should explain what that is.
Yes, it's an honorary title. First, it was it'd been come up with in the late 18th century. And you are an official aide-de-camp of the governor of Kentucky, allowed to use the title colonel. And other than that, it's mostly philanthropy and representing the state well and all that. A number of states actually have similar programs. Tennessee has one called Tennessee Squire, and but it's neat. So I can now be referred to as Colonel Abnormal Partner. And other than that,
Colonel,
here's our guest this month.
So we have with us today Frank Warner. Like any good soldier's son, Frank Warner moved with his family from fort to fort, accepted each change, and was ready to move again. Then in 1960, Frank's father was ordered to Fort Huachuca, Arizona. This was the 5th Army post of Frank's childhood, the first place he never wanted to leave. And I can relate to that as an Air Force brat. So when his father was ordered to Vietnam in 1963, sending Frank and the rest of the family to Pennsylvania, the uprooting wasn't easy. Frank's book, Tumbleweed Forts, Adventures of an Army Brat, describes the joys of living in Fort Huachuca and the heartache of leaving it behind. I'm kind of laughing because I had to put the
Oh yeah,
phonetic
it's a
pronunciation.
tough. It's tough pronunciation. My grandmother, you might have seen
It's
the
easy
book.
once you say it, Huachuca. It's not hard to say, but when you're
Yeah.
looking at the spelling.
Yeah, the HUACHUCA. My grandmother called
Right.
my grandmother called it Fort Hoochie Coochie. So
I just read that part in the book.
Yeah.
That was funny. And I was like, oh no, I hope I don't accidentally say Fort Hoochie Coochie.
no, WahCHOOka.
Huachuca. So what's our first cocktail?
Well, we have a marvelous kind of stars and stripes cocktail, which is a layered drink with red, white, and blue. However, the way it ends up working out, it comes out as red, blue, and white, because what ends up happening is, because of specific gravity, we need to layer it such that the layers don't mix. And when I layer it this way, it'll work out. So what we do is we're going to have 3 layers, which we mix some crushed ice, which is trying to reset itself as non-crushed ice. This is one of those drinks where it may take a little bit to make because of all the ice scooping I have to do. And with the first layer, I put in grenadine, which is right here. So a brilliant red color of grenadine. And essentially the proportion of the ingredients, you have 1/3 grenadine in the ice, then 1/3 blue curacao, and the top layer is 1/3 lemon and 1/3 vodka. And the fact that that adds up to more than one reflects, people making alcoholic drinks doing math. So, and again, what I was riffing off of with this drink is the patriotic theme of the first reading and all, and also our July 4th holiday as well. And so we have the first layer, which is a brilliant red, which I'll pour into the base. And then I will move to the next layer with the blue curacao. Maybe I can short circuit this by just a broad scoop into the bowl. And then we get our wonderful, brilliant blue curacao liqueur. And again, maintaining the 1/3, 1/3 proportion. And Laura, of course, will compress this part of the video since I'm taking up all kinds of time here.
I took the opportunity to show the dog, who has not gotten up off her couch all day, but decided she had to join us for some cocktails.
You can maybe put this over on the other side. And then we have the third bowl. And on the top of that, we get some lemonade.
We're using Arnold Palmer for the lemonade.
Because we didn't really have lemonade. I always really loved Arnold Palmer.
And is this vodka going in?
Yes.
So we're now mixing the vodka with the Arnold Palmer, or what the recipe calls for is lemonade with vodka.
Yes. And if we're lucky, this will stay on top. Which it sort of did. The lemonade probably would have made it float a little easier. Oh, I think your version of the drink is working. So here we have the red, white, and blue.
How about that?
Different layers of ice.
It's looking good. Patriotic.
Very patriotic. I love that.
Cheers.
Cheers. So I think I just got the grenadine
Mm-hmm.
on the
You can just
bottom.
lift your straw if you'd like.
So you can drink this in layers. I just got must have been the blue,
Blue curacao. It's also her sweet liqueur.
but it looks like you kind of can mix it up.
Well, you could, yes, and then you'll get the whole thing together.
So now it's kind of a purple
Wow.
instead of red, white, and blue.
Yeah.
That is a neat drink. And as I was saying, when they find something I like, I might drink the whole thing. So we are ready for reading number 1.
Oh. All righty. Okay. This is from the book Tumbleweed Forts, June 1961. School was out for summer in Fort Huachuca, Arizona. Flavio and I walked our bikes up the Smith Avenue hill past General Myers School on the left. When we reached the big intersection, we saw a white-gloved MP holding up regular traffic. Army jeeps, trucks, tanks, and 155 millimeter howitzers, big artillery guns, were moving through the intersection in a convoy toward the fort's west range. This was maneuvers week for the National Guard out of Phoenix, and they were testing some big weapons. To get around the traffic jam, Flavio and I jumped on our bikes and slipped away between the chapel and Whitside School. Biking west on Ree Avenue, we passed 7 old wooden buildings on our right. They had long wooden porches and large second-floor balconies. The buildings used to be barracks. The second building was the post library now. The other barracks had become Army offices. They all still looked like barracks to me. Flavio and I quickly made our way around the fort's accounting office to Auger Avenue. Here were more old buildings on our right, and to our left, the open parade field. We sped up here along a long straightaway, going west past the old guardhouse and Post Bakery. Nearly halfway down Auger Avenue, I yelled to Flavio, "I'll race you to the flagpole." I didn't know why I said that. Of the two of us, Flavio was the real athlete. He was skinny and so was I, but he was stronger and faster than most boys our age. He knew it, and I knew he knew it. Both of us stood up on our pedals and revved for speed. The flagpole was on the other side of the parade field, but it wasn't far. To get there, we had 2 turns and less than 600 yards of street. We accelerated. Flavio zipped ahead, and I tried to keep up. My legs already hurt at the first turn, a left onto Adair Avenue, which was a short street, a turnaround at the south end of the parade field. Flavio was 2 bicycle lengths ahead of me. I told myself I had to get going. Flavio looked back. I pedaled harder, and my thighs and calves hurt even more. I kept at it and noticed that in just 60 or 70 yards, I was closing in on him. At the second left, turning northeast from Adair, he seemed to be sprinting, and yet I caught up. I was passing him. This was on Colonel's Row. With the parade field still on our left, we hustled past the mansions on our right. 250 yards ago, and I was a bicycle length ahead of Flavio. I knew he probably was letting me go ahead, and I knew he probably knew I knew, but I enjoyed first place for the moment. With 150 yards to go, I was 2 bicycle lengths ahead. Then Flavio made his move. He was catching up. I pushed the pedals with all the energy I had, but he was gaining on my right. The flagpole looked within reach now, just ahead and slightly to the left, its stars and stripes fluttering at the parade's southeast edge. With 30 yards to go, Flavio trailed but was speeding up to me. We both were pedaling like that cartoon roadrunner when we crossed the invisible finish line. "A tie," Flavio yelled. Here we were, laughing and exhausted, circling to a stop between the flagpole and General Erhane's house. It was a friendly tie.
Very nice. One of the things that really struck me, and actually before I say that, I would like to ask our listeners to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We've been doing this a while, and it's time to really start growing our channel and our podcast. And so we officially have a sponsor this month. This is going to come as a surprise to you.
Wow.
We do. The sponsor is Gabriel's Horn Press. And imagine that. Anybody who knows that's my publishing company. So I am officially sponsoring this episode. And so I will tell people, go to gabrielshornpress.com and check out all our fantastic authors. I think we have about a dozen authors, don't we? Yeah, we have about a dozen authors plus an annual poetry anthology. So what really kind of jumped out to me about this reading was that you just take it in stride that you're riding past armed soldiers, which to me is normal too, you know, having grown up. In fact, I have a funny story about I used to live on base at the Armed Forces Staff College, if you know where that is.
No, where's that?
It's in Norfolk, Virginia.
Okay.
And it's mainly a naval base, but my dad was there for 6 months training for his next job. And so it's divided between the residential and the base by a huge fence with an armed guard there. And there was a hole in that fence. And so I was like third grade, you know, not as bright as I like to think I became in later years. And my friends and I always thought it was fun to try and sneak through that hole, see if we could wiggle through. And we really believed this armed guard didn't see us. We thought we were pulling one over on him. And in retrospect, I'm like, it was probably an 18-and-a-half-year-old kid. And he was probably trying not to laugh because he obviously knew that we thought we were pulling one over on him.
Right.
But I'm kind of curious, you know, what kind of response do you get from non-brats when you talk about things like this, like armed guards were part of your background?
Well, generally it's a surprise to a lot of my friends that I was an Army brat, and reading the book, they would say how they didn't realize there was such a world. You know, they don't even think about soldiers having families. Well, they do, and they often follow them from fort to fort and all over the world. So it's just a surprise to them. But I guess when you think about it, even as a civilian, you figure these soldiers have to be somewhere, and they have to have their families close by, or it's kind of ridiculous.
Right. That actually comes as a shock to me. Like, how do they not know that you grew up in the Army? Because the first thing people ask me is, where are you from? I'm like, I don't know. I'm an Air Force brat. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my father settled down in Pennsylvania here in 1966. I was just starting high school, so I spent all 4 of my high school years in the same high school. So that was a good thing, because you don't want to be, that's my recommendation to anybody, don't try everything you can to avoid breaking up your children's high school years. That's a really bad thing. So that was a good thing for me, and it also sort of disguised my background, because a lot of people, my fellow students were from other schools, and so they didn't know which one came from which school, and so we were all in it together in high school. So that way,
right
there, and then of course in college, nobody knows where anybody was from, you know.
Right. That's kind of what happened to me too. I ended up finishing high school when my dad retired. Well, he retired while I was in high school.
Yeah.
Long story short, you know, I finished high school there. Now, you were overseas a few places. Where all did you live?
Right. When you brought up the thing about the chickens there, it reminded me, we lived in France for a while back in the late 50s, and we lived in this old farmhouse next to the farm, and I remember this old lady cutting off the heads of these chickens, and the chickens still running around. And you always hear about that, chickens running around without their heads. Well, that's the first time I ever saw it, and so that was in Les Ilettes, France, near Verdun. My father was stationed at Verdun. He's part of the Signal Corps, and after that we moved to Heidelberg, Germany, where they have a big castle and very pretty town. And and we lived in Germany even earlier, but I was pretty much a baby at that time and didn't remember that part. So when we left Germany, we flew to the United States for Fort Huachuca, Arizona. And if you notice, the beginning of the book is we're on that airplane and the plane catches fire. And so, so we have to land in Prestwick, Scotland. And when we landed there, we got to see all of Bobby Burns' territory and learn a little bit about the literature. Even as little kids, we could appreciate a little bit of it. And one of our guides told us that Elvis Presley had been at the same airport 6 months earlier. He also he's also coming back from his Army duty in Germany at that time. So he was 6 months ahead of us coming back to the United States.
Oh, that's a cool story. You know, you kind of made me ask a question now that I had in a different section. Actually, it is in this section. I was going to say the book literally starts on fire,
Yeah.
literally.
Yes.
And I was impressed by the way your parents just kind of were like, don't worry about it. And oh, look, we have an opportunity to go to Scotland. You know, do you find that that's pretty typical of military parents to be that blasé about danger, or to see the opportunity and tell kids not to worry?
Well, I think they come up a lot of against a lot of things, so they're used to surprises and used to suspense too. So they have to handle that in different ways. I think they're still human beings, and there's a variety of responses to everything, even in the Army. So not everybody reacts to the same thing the same way. But in this case, I think we took our cue. My brothers and me took our cue from my father and mother, who acted very calm. I mean, one engine was on fire, and they were dumping the fuel, and nobody seemed panicked. So we figured, okay, this is just something we take care of, and we did. So.
And I think that's very typical of kids in general, and maybe military brats even a little more. We just take things in stride and like, well, my parents aren't worried about plane. And even as I was reading it, I'm thinking, I must be reading this wrong. The plane's on fire. Nobody is worried. They're
Tuesday.
dumping fuel in the ocean. And nobody on the plane seems, because it was a plane full of military transport. So was military personnel, right? Not just you.
It was families and individual soldiers and airmen. Yeah. So it was a mixture.
I just have to know on a more personal basis what years you were in Stuttgart.
Oh, that was when I was like a baby at the time. We were in Stuttgart. My brother Mark was born there in 1954.
Okay.
I was only 2 years old then. Then we came back to the United States and lived in Fort Knox, and then we went back to when we went to France. Yeah.
I was curious because I was also in Stuttgart for 3 years. But for me, I was also there as a baby, and then my dad was in Vietnam when I was born. Just
was he?
we went to Stuttgart.
What year was that?
He was there in 67 and 68, I would say.
And my father went there in 63 under Kennedy. And
right.
So basically we sort of joked that he started the war. He just went over there and
I know it dates back to the 1950s, right, French Indochina, but other than that.
Well, but the big presence was 10,000 under Kennedy.
Yes, right. Yeah.
And for our listeners, you should back up and listen to the episode with Sandy Hanna, who talks about being an American kid in Vietnam and accidentally witnessing the coup, the military coup firsthand.
Oh,
it's an amazing story.
In 63.
Was it November of 62, maybe? Or
63.
Was it?
It was the same month Kennedy was shot. Kennedy was shot a few weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. It's a really neat story. And that was a really fascinating episode to hear her tell that story. I wanted to ask, since all your readings are from Tumbleweed Forts, why Fort Huachuca in particular? What was it about that place that you wanted to write about that and none of the other places you lived?
Well, I guess Germany, maybe I was a little bit younger then. It's funny I think we all know this, when we're 5, 6, 7 years old, you're still attached more to your family than to your friends. After about 7 or 8 years old, 10 especially, I think you start really making these friendships that should, in the usual flow of things, should become lifelong friendships. So at age 8, 9, 10 in Fort Huachuca, not only was I making my first strong friendships, Flavia was one of them. There was Emily. There was Skeeter and Arthur. Anyway, but not only was that true, but the whole place was just so big, and we could explore miles and miles of desert. We could go up to WahCHOOka Canyon on our own. The kids could just go up. We could take a bus into Sierra Vista, the town next door, without any adult supervision at all, and nobody would even ask about us. As long as we were there for dinner, that was it. So
was this all on base?
well, except for Sierra Vista is off base, but
Okay.
Sierra Vista is a
Right.
town right next door.
Okay.
And but most of it, you have miles and miles on base of desert floor to look at, the tumbleweed forts to build and have fun with, baseball fields, and then there's WahCHOOka canyons with these huge mountains on the south side of the post, where you could hike up the canyon and look for the rumored gold. And so there's so many things that were going on at the same time. The place was almost magical to me, and then to be
Right.
so abruptly taken away made me maybe romanticize it a little more than the average place.
Well, it turned into a wonderful book.
Well,
So
thank you.
we are ready for cocktail number 2. And I'm going to turn off the fan and see if I can hear you better.
I think it's our heat pumps that are doing most of that. I guess that fan was pretty loud. So this cocktail is an atomic cocktail.
Oh,
So it's the for the second reading, also dealing with kind of the silver dollar kind of aspect to things. And so
Sure.
what makes this an atomic cocktail is not the vodka or the cognac in it, but when you finish it off, you put a little bit of champagne on top. So it sparkles, and just like what radiation might do for you, this
I like
cocktail actually does date back to the time here, actually down the road in Oak Ridge, part of the Manhattan Project, and following on from that. So it's kind of a neat cocktail.
I
And
like
we'll
your
start off-
your themes there. That's great.
Yes, very good. And I have to confess, this month I was not able to do as much research, so Laura did a lot of the research for me, and that was really good.
And what's this called? This drink?
An atomic cocktail.
Okay.
And I'm going to make 2 versions of this because we're actually running low on vodka. So I'm going to make Laura's version with a slightly raspberry flavored vodka, and we'll see how that goes. So you mix equal parts of cognac and vodka. Then you put in just a little bit of sherry to give it some color. And while I don't have sherry, I have a close relative in the claret family, which is port wine. So I will give just a little bit in there for a little flavor and a little color. And I will shake this. Let me strain out the ice into a glass.
There we go.
So we're in the process here. That's kind of an interesting color that it has, with the port and the cognac mixing together have done. And do not go
Don't
drinking that
drink
yet.
it yet. But you can kind of see the color. It is, would you call that chartreuse?
A bit,
Almost.
yes.
That's a very deep color. And
Finish it
we have-
off with champagne. And we will not forget the obligatory.
I have to wear my atomic goggles to look at that.
Yes, indeed.
I'll hold it
So
up
it looks kind of
close.
atomic, doesn't it? With the
Very lovely,
blue-
very lovely.
from the blue vodka.
Yeah.
Now we'll make.
And
my
of
version.
course, you can make this with any vodka. So, I'm going to say what's different about your version.
My version is just going to have regular vodka in it, so it will not have the additional color, but it will still be half and half vodka and cognac. And what do you think of that drink now that you've had a taste of it?
It's strong.
Yes, the
There is
cognac and vodka will do
something
that.
almost sweet to it.
Yes.
So I do like it, but I think it's the kind of thing you would want to drink only in certain situations. It's like the other one is sweet. You could almost enjoy it anytime. I mean, if you like sweet, I guess some people don't.
So is this, you say, is this strong? You said this is strong.
It's definitely strong,
Could you
but there
end?
is,
Could you end a war with it?
I don't think so. Although, right, if everybody would just sit down and drink together, maybe. And I may have to let the dog in and out and in and out several times. Come here, sweetheart. Are you going to come and say hi?
Now
Come
with
here.
the regular vodka, I'm getting more of a almost an orangish tone to the
Yeah.
drink.
There we
I will
go.
now add the champagne and the obligatory orange slice, and we will have cheers.
Yeah, so interesting. These are the same drink, but they look very different because of the different vodka.
There you go.
And I think I'm going to squeeze that orange in there.
Yeah, I
You're
just dumped
so good.
mine all the way in. So let me give a taste to yours and see if it's different.
It's got a very classic taste, of course, because of the cognac and a very strong taste because of the vodka. There's not much else in it, other than a touch of the champagne, both of which are alcoholic. And then you get your little, tidbit of the orange sliced.
I like
So-
this one better.
You like yours
So-
better? And I'm surprised because it has the raspberry flavor.
Yeah,
the
I
real
like
vodka.
this. I do like it. I don't think I could drink a lot of this. I think it would really put you over the edge quicker than, say, lawnmower beer. Frank, you have a drink with you.
I have the Dos Equis beer. So,
Fantastic.
apparently popular in Arizona.
Es muy bueno.
I
Una cerveza más fría.
I did want to mention that when I was doing the research, there's actually something called a mushroom cocktail, if you
Oh,
can
boy.
believe it, that includes the
Sounds good.
shiitake mushroom. I think we're gonna find that recipe and make that and maybe do a cocktail cam with that. It sounds interesting. And I think we're ready for reading number 2.
Yes.
All right, on the atomic theme, let's see. Dad had just returned to Fort Huachuca from 2 months at the Nevada test site. It was July 18th, 1962. That night, my younger brother Mark went into the kitchen as Dad shined his boots and Mom put away the dishes. Dad, you said you'd tell us about the atom bomb, Mark said. You want a full report? Dad asked. Yeah. Dad called the rest of us into the kitchen. My older brother Carl, my youngest brother George, and me. I'll tell you how it was, he said. It was bright enough to blind you. The bomb, the atomic device, went off just before noon. And you know how bright the desert is that time of day. Well, this bomb was brighter. They told us not to look at the initial flash, even with the dark goggles on. So I looked down for a second or two. I looked sideways and saw these guys already looking up. Their faces glowed. When I raised my eyes, the atomic cloud was crackling and booming and boiling with fire. It actually was exploding as it climbed into the sky. Pretty high in the air, it was still a ball of fire. Could you see a mushroom cloud? Mark wondered. Oh, it looked like a mushroom. It did. The dry lake bed was powder to begin with, and when the bomb went off with the explosion and then the implosion, it grabbed all this powder and threw it straight up in the air. It went up nearly 3 miles. What happened to the drones? Carl asked. Did they crash? The drones? Well, let me tell you what happened. They crashed, Carl said. Now hold on, Dad said. What happened was we launched 3 drones one at a time. The first one went out, took measurements of the radioactivity for almost a half hour, and then it parachuted safely back to our camp. We sent up the second one, and that one worked fine too. Then before we set up the last one, the last drone, I told the men, I'm so sure this drone won't crash that I'll put $4 silver on it. $4 for my 4 boys. I duct taped the coins to the top of the drone and we sent it out. And guess what happened? It crashed, Mark asked. Yeah. Ah, no, we said. It hit the ground hard, George guessed. That's about it, George, Dad said. It flew behind a hill about 3 miles out and disappeared from radar. So it crashed behind the hill, I asked. That's right, Dad said. He pulled out his wallet and dropped 4 coins into a handkerchief. Are these the silver dollars? Carl asked. I thought the drone crashed. It did crash, but I couldn't leave it out there. 2 days after the test, when the radioactivity was down, I got 2 of my men in a truck and we found the wreckage. We picked up the drone. There weren't too many pieces. And I got the silver dollars. They weren't even scratched. They were 4 Liberty Head silver dollars, 3 minted in 1889 and 1 in 1819.
Oh my.
As
That's
Dad,
wonderful.
as Dad placed the heavy coins in our hands, I wondered if the silver would be hot. But it was no warmer than any other coin from my father's hands. They're your silver dollars, Dad said. I'll hold them for you right now. They'll be safe, I promise, and you can see them anytime you want. That was it.
That is fantastic. And yes, that was real money. And do you still have your silver dollar by
Here they are. Here they are right here.
Oh, that is fantastic.
I'm not sure. Okay, you can see them here. Oops. I guess
Yes,
it
please.
blurs too much up there. But here's all 4 of them. I got them. Now, 3 of these obviously are my 3 brothers, but But they don't know. No, I'm just kidding. They know. They know where they
They
are.
do now.
And I tell them the same thing. If you want them, come get them. So yeah, well, again, they were at Nevada test site in this is 1962, and in 1962, silver was still, I'm not sure the word legal, but whatever it is, but silver coins were more common then. Almost all the silver coins were silver, and also during their breaks while they were waiting for the atomic test for about a month, they were waiting as more scientists came in. And by the way, the more scientists were coming in toward the end because they knew this was going to be one of the last open air atomic tests ever, because Kennedy was ready to sign the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. There was only one more test after this one in the atmosphere. But anyway, so they would, during their breaks, waiting for all the experiments to get ready for this test, the soldiers would go into Las Vegas and go to the casinos, and so they'd get lots of silver dollars, and that's why my father just happened to have 4 hanging around in his pocket.
That's a neat story.
That's fun.
You know, I was curious, perhaps betraying that I don't know a ton about atomic weapons. How did they not suffer ill effects from being this close to the testing?
Well, they weren't as naive about it as some people would have you believe about the Army. A lot of people over the years, well, these guys are exposed, and they had no idea it could hurt them. Well, no, they knew. And
Oh, I'm sure they knew. Yeah.
They already had test results from Japan to see and saw the results of certain levels of radiation on human beings. But so generally they figured the size of this atom bomb, which was smaller than the one that exploded at Hiroshima, or the one at Nagasaki, the size of it required you should be at least 3 miles away. Now, there was a mistake made, though, not with that atom bomb, but with the hydrogen bomb that was exploded about 2 months before this atom bomb. My father was there for this, and this was supposed to be an underground test, but it turned out to be bigger than expected, and it blew open the ground, so it became an overground test. So it became open air, atmospheric test is what they used as the phrase. And so my father was there. They had to move their entire camp a different direction because the direction of flow of the radioactivity. And they did test for years the path of that cloud over the United States. It flowed north by northeast, and they found some slightly higher levels of cancer over the next 30, 40 years. And my father was tested after that. I think every 10 years they tested him, or took him. They had to fill out a questionnaire. How you doing? So he died at age 52, and so he survived the atomic test and World War II and Vietnam. So I guess he did all right.
Right. But he died at 52 when that
82.
Oh, 82. Okay.
He
That
died
makes a lot more sense. I was like, so
82 years old.
he
Yeah.
physically was fine. That
Yeah.
makes a lot more sense. Although I'm told my dad has ill effects from Agent Orange, and he's 83, and last
Yeah.
I saw him, he looked pretty good.
Did he? Yeah.
So you tell an interesting story in your book about this search for gold.
Oh, okay.
Can you tell our 9.05 million listeners about that?
Oh, okay. You have 9 million listeners there?
I'm a fiction writer.
Oh, okay. That's good. Well, okay.
Didn't
Yes.
ask the scientist.
In my scientific data, which is pulled from my imagination, yes, we do.
Yeah. Well, the story is about Private Bob Jones. And in 1941, before we were in World War II, he was one of about 10,000 soldiers in Fort Huachuca. And they had a lot of time to do nothing there. So they went up exploring WahCHOOka Canyon, and he and a friend of his, according to his story, fell into this hole in WahCHOOka Canyon, down through a shaft, and found all these stacks of gold bricks, which they estimated from his description of it to be worth $6 million at least even then. So he came back after the war, but his friend had died in the war. So he's the only one that can corroborate. Well, nobody could corroborate the story. It was his story alone. But he did get somebody to come in with him and start and dig for that in that area of WahCHOOka Canyon near the water pump. And they couldn't find it in 1969. So now they decided, while I was there, well, it took a while, but a couple of years while I was there. It was just before we left, as a matter of fact. So we were there from 60 to 63. Well, early 63, they got permission from the White House to use the Army to do some of the effort there to open up the ground again, to make one big last search for it. And they still didn't find it. Bob Jones's friend enlisted a guy who believed in science fiction. Well, in science, well, I shouldn't say. He believed in flying saucers. He claimed that a flying saucer that crashed in New Mexico had technology on it that helped him as a diviner. You know, as a what they call the dowsing. Yeah, to find, like they would often find water with these dowsing rods, and other thing he claimed he could find other natural resources like oil and gold. So, and he had these what he called doodle bugs. You know, they were just basically like fancy dowsers with a thing at the end that looked like
that was really interesting reading about that, because your father's having this really bizarre conversation with this man who's just saying, well, of course we hired him. He believes in the scientific method. And your dad's just kind of like,
everybody.
He says he got this from a spaceship, and he, it was for real.
And that was Silas Newton was his name. Silas Newton. He features prominently in a lot of science fiction and allegedly science books of the 1950s as somebody who was one of the people that probably was at Area 51 or things like that. And he made a lot of money claiming to be able to find oil in Colorado. And in those days, with no internet, people in Arizona couldn't check on him. There was no,
right.
The FBI actually did check on him, but it was a little late. So when he came out to Arizona, then he was living in Phoenix for a while, and he must have heard about this new dig for gold in the canyon. He probably came up and said, look, I got equipment, technology. We'll find it now. We'll find exactly where that gold is. And the fact is he didn't find it.
Was the gold ever found, or do you think Bob Jones just made this up?
No one knows, it was never found, though. Unless it was done secretly, I don't think so. But no one they actually did one more look in the 1970s and didn't find it again. So the odds of it really,
if it's a hoax, it was a very successful one. It's a fascinating story. And as I was reading it, I thought, this is one of the things I love about growing up in the military. You get to go to all these spots and learn these local color stories that you would never hear otherwise, and you get to meet fascinating people you'd never meet otherwise.
That's true.
So,
and we were near Tombstone at Fort Huachuca. The cavalry at Fort Huachuca in the 1880s named Tombstone because this guy named Ed Shefflin said, he came out there and he said, look, I want to dig out here in the rocks looking for silver or gold, and the cavalry told him, because of the Apaches going through there all the time, that the only rock you'll find there is your tombstone. And so he named it Tombstone. And he made a lot of money off of the silver he found. He actually did find silver, a lot of it.
Yeah, I'm not surprised in that area. I have so many questions for you. We're going to have to stay and do our after hours, but we need to move on to drink number 3.
All right. And here I was inspired by the leaving from Arizona and, the idea of going down Route 66 to Pennsylvania and all that. And, the inspiration for this cocktail was essentially goodbye sunshine. You're leaving Arizona. And so here we have a cocktail that consists of relatively simple ingredients. We're going to start with some ice in the glass because it doesn't need much mixing. And out here in the 90-degree temperatures are ice is rapidly disappearing.
I think it's about 89 here, so we're cool.
Yes, I had heard that it was even perhaps somewhat warmer up by you than it was even here in eastern Tennessee.
Maybe.
We're going to first start with 2 ounces of rum because any kind of sunset drink, I think, needs to start with rum to some degree.
Now, do you get
Yeah.
feedback? You get feedback from people saying that they drink with you every time they watch you, or what?
We've had a number of requests for the recipes, and
Okay.
so I definitely send those out. Those are,
All right.
it's nice to be able to share
Good.
that kind of a thing. What I now have is some Topo Chico ginger beer in order to put on top of the rum, and it's essentially 2-to-1 ginger beer to rum over the ice. And the last thing we will put on again is our obligatory orange slice to give it again a nice sort of tropical goodbye sunshine, goodbye Arizona type of a feel. So here is our goodbye sunshine.
All righty.
Your third reading.
A great
No,
idea.
the one that I saw online was a distinct, very bright yellow marigold color. So I'm not sure why ours isn't.
Because they used a particular type of rum that's
Okay.
a lot more gold
Okay.
in color. And this one happens to be, it is a gold rum, but it is not as gold
Right.
as the Mount Gay rum that they were talking about.
So this is like goodbye, very early morning before the sun really comes up, sunshine. But
The pre-dawn.
yeah, right. That's nice. It has,
Good.
yeah, you really taste the ginger beer in that, and it's got a nice zing. That's perfect for a really hot day, which
Happen to have it.
yeah.
It still tastes like Dos Equis to me. So.
As long as it tastes good, that's all that matters.
It's fine.
We're ready for reading number three.
Let's see. Okay, here's the last one. All right, so this is about leaving Arizona. And well, you heard about my friends Flavio and Emily and Terry and Skeeter. Anyway, most of our belongings were in boxes on a moving truck headed for Pennsylvania. One of the smaller boxes held my books, my baseball mitt, my rock collection, and my model-covered wagon. Each Monday morning, early Monday morning, April 15th, 1963, the post engineer came to our house for final inspection. He walked room to room looking one last time for scratches, burns, breaks, dirt, and dust we might have left during our 2.5 years on post. Dad followed the engineer every step. As it turned out, we passed the inspection. In the kitchen, Mom cleaned up one last time before she got on the phone to confirm that our school records were on the way to our next school in Pennsylvania. At Colonel Johnston's school, I said goodbye again and again, and I was telling myself I really wasn't going, or that at least that I'd return soon. At lunch in the noisy cafeteria, Emily Embry asked, "Will you forget us?" "Heck no," I said. "How could I? And I'll probably be back here after a year in time for 7th grade. We'll all be up at General Myers School, the whole gang, maybe." The school day ended in confusion. As soon as Mrs. Klein wished me good luck, I darted out to the hallway to find my brothers Carl and Mark. Mom was driving out to our school to give the three of us a ride to a guest house where the whole family would spend our last night on post. Friends were outside the school to wave goodbye. Flavio Garcia, his smile as friendly as ever, said he'd write. Billy Ward told me to have fun. Terry Cook gave me a hug. "Thanks for being my friend," she said. I hugged her back. Skeeter Johnson cried as I got in the car. I felt like crying too, but I was dazed and distracted. I looked from the car as we pulled away. I couldn't see Emily anywhere. I'd hoped to see her one more time. I guess she was inside helping Mrs. Klein with something. I wanted to tell Mom to stop the car. I wanted a few more minutes to give everyone a wholehearted goodbye. But I kept quiet. I didn't want to embarrass myself in front of my brothers. As the car pulled away past the bicycle racks, down the school driveway, and out Rucker Street, in 5 seconds, Colonel Johnston School was out of sight. Goodbye was that fast. The next day, as we rode Route 66 out of Arizona, the sun set behind us, behind high cliffs. On the highway that night, I imagined the faces of my friends in Fort Huachuca. I felt numb. It seemed I'd left behind something big and important, a picture half drawn, the story of my life that would go on now without me.
So you were a reporter. Clearly, I thought you have good writing skills, because as I was reading this, and then later as I was reading more about Emily and the whole book, I was like, did he end up with her? Did he end up with her?
I will say something though. I didn't know where anybody went for years. I knew that Flavio wrote me. I knew he went to Germany later, but then I lost track of him. You know how things go those days. Especially if you leave the country, there's no way you're going to keep track. And Flavio's last name Garcia, and that's about as common as Smith. And so for years I had no touch with him, and I found him in 1994, so that's 31 years later. Now, after the book came out, just by accident, I was looking through newspapers.com, and how you can look back at old newspapers and so on. And I found that Emily, that's not a real name, Emily actually graduated in 1970 from high school. I graduated in Pennsylvania from high school, Pottstown, Pennsylvania. She graduated from the Carlisle High School here, also in Pennsylvania, an hour and a half away.
Wow.
So that's as close as we came after Fort Huachuca. And she lives in the South now, but that's
amazing.
All I know, yeah. So it's funny.
That's amazing. As I was reading this, all these names of my friends in various places were coming back, and Karen and Mary. I remembered someone named Walter at Jeb Stort Elementary, a name you will not find in the North. So it was, I liked that. Just reading about your experiences really brought back a lot of my own. Now, as I read this excerpt, but also as I read the book, I was curious. You were 5th grade when your dad was sent to Vietnam, and in the reading,
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, in the reading, you seem much more concerned about leaving your friends, and yet you did have some understanding of what was going on in Vietnam. Where was that balance?
Well, it wasn't as big a war. In fact, none of my friends even knew where Vietnam was when my father went there in '63. And so that was a fairly new thing. My father, as you might see in the story, told us it was not a big war. He said he was in the big war, World War II, and he survived that. So he didn't expect to be doing any fighting in Vietnam. He's going to be setting up radio communications for the South Vietnamese Army. So it didn't sound real bad, although we were hearing every month reports of maybe, I think it might have been 10 Americans killed a month. That was a whole lot less than 100 dying in a week. But if you're a kid and you hear 10, well, if one of the 10 is your father, that's a big thing.
Right.
So yes, we were worried a little, but we got the signal from our mother, who seemed fairly calm and collected about it, except when we got that one phone call. Toward the end of my father's year in Vietnam, I think she was getting a little nervous because my uncle Carl had died in Korea just before he was supposed to come back, and then the telegram came. So one day we got a phone call. This is early 1964, and we didn't know who it was from. And my mother asked, "Who was that from?" And I said, "It was just a wrong number, I think." And she said, "Was it Western Union?" So you knew right there. That's what that was. I mean, we had to put 2 and 2 together a little bit there because we weren't quite sure what all that meant. But it didn't take long before we figured out she's worried about the telegram that says he's dead.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So
and
that was about the only other thing was that while he was gone, we had some cleaning duties to do in the house. We were living with our my grandmother and great aunt. And one thing we weren't allowed to touch was this ashtray next to my mother's bed. The ashes were in there. And I thought, why the heck does he not want us to clean the ashtray? And then one day I got close to the ashtray and I smelled it and I could see my father.
You could see your father?
I could see my
Oh,
father.
because it was his.
That was pell-mell cigarette ashes. And so my mother was
You
thinking,
had me scared. I was afraid it was the
Oh,
cremated
no, no.
body and that you were going to clean the ashes.
no, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. But yeah, to her, those ashes didn't mean death. They meant his life. And
That's a powerful story.
that
You know,
reminds-
that you would hang on to literally somebody's cigarette ashes.
I think
because
that's
you don't-
really common. I mean, they probably held on to certain clothing with a cologne that I don't. She probably had that too. I didn't even know about it, but we knew about the ashes and we smelled it and we figured out what that was all about.
As usual, I have way too many questions for the time allotted. Are you able to stay after a little bit?
Oh yeah, I can say sure. Yes.
So for now, can you tell people where to find you online?
Well, I do have a site called Free Frank Warner online, and you can look up things there. I don't know the actual link, but if you look up Free Frank Warner and Tumbleweed Forts, the name of the book,
Okay.
name of the main book, you'd find it there. Also, I then later, after the book came out, I went to Fort Huachuca 2 years ago and I met up with my old friend Flavio Garcia there. He lives out in Huntington Beach, California now. So, but we spoke at a local museum in Sierra Vista, right outside of Fort Huachuca. Talked about the book, signed some books,
That's neat.
and wait, what was the question you had there? This was leading to something.
It was about where people can find you
Oh, yeah.
online.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I want to mention that not only is Tumbleweed Forts something to look for if you're searching for this story, somebody out there in Fort Huachuca recommended that I break the book up. It's 400 pages, which even as an adult is daunting to me, to be honest with you. The book's got to be really good. You know, you got to be J.K. Rowling or somebody like that to get me in a book 400 pages. So what I did since then was to break the book up. The book now is broken up into 5 books called WahCHOOka books. It's the same story, basically. It begins slightly different to make sure you're caught up on major events, and so you can follow the story. You can read one book at a time and enjoy it. And if you want to go on to the next one, you can, or take a break. So the 5 books, the first one is called Ride West to Fort Huachuca. The second one is called Water Rescue at the Desert Oasis. That's when Flavio saved my life in a lake. And third one is called WahCHOOka Drones Over Through the Atomic Cloud. Fourth one is The New Girl. This is about Emily. The New Girl chases dust devils, which he did. And the last one is called, I don't know what the last one is called. If you get to those first 4. Let's see, wait, the last one is, the last one is The Big Dig for WahCHOOka Gold. Yes, that's the last one. So
I like that part of the story.
they're all
Laura,
about
where can
100 pages. They're each about 100 pages. A lot easier to read, little
Very
bite-sized
digestible.
nuggets. Yeah. So
Yes, so Laura, where can we find you and your not abnormal host?
My normal co-host, you can find him at aperfectpint.net. That is Michael Agnew, who is Minnesota's first beer cicerone. He's currently on break. You can find me at lauravoseka.com or bluebellschronicles.com. You can find Michael and I together at booksandbrews.net. We're also on social medias, but it would take me an hour to list all of those. Since Chris is my abnormal co-host for the time being, you can find us at glenmerrillfarms.wordpress.com and see pictures of those adorable bunnies. Do you have any upcoming events where people might come to see you, Frank?
nothing Now, I might go out to Fort Huachuca in October, but I have no specific plans. So I might stop in
Okay.
one of the schools. Yeah.
But our listeners, including my imaginary millions, can keep an eye on your site for
Hi,
that.
hi, millions of people. Good to see you.
They're not imaginary, they're differently imagined.
Right.
I like it.
Very, very real.
All right.
So you must have some upcoming events,
Actually,
whether they're virtual.
right. No, these are for real. I'm not just imagining them. I will be at the Morristown Farmers Market, I believe on July 5th. It's a Friday evening, and that is in Morristown, Tennessee. I am also set up, thanks to Chris, to be displaying my books at the Southern Festival of Books in Nashville, Tennessee on October 26th and 27th. And our sponsor, Gabriel's Horn Press, is accepting submissions for its anthologies of traditionally formatted poetry, but new, I'm not saying that well, on the topics of music and faith.
Who do we have coming next month, Laura?
So I say this every month. Every month it's true. This is not my imagination, it's true. I'm excited to welcome next month Devery Donaldson, who is a comedian and an author in Los Angeles. She is a storyteller and social media fast talker. So we're going to have some monster, something before we interview her.
I was born in New Jersey. I can't.
Fast talk. She is best known for her witty, relatable, authentic storytelling that is equal parts heart and humor. On the eve of her 30th birthday, Devery quit her job as a florist and flew to Scotland without much of a plan, but the intention to build a life she could be proud of and to find the feeling of being at home. There, she discovered a new wave of people all over the world who resonated with the impulse to take a leap and find something new. She has been interviewed by BBC. Her travels have been covered by dozens of news outlets in the UK, and she even made it into Google's Year in Search 2022 short film. So my understanding is that her million followers are not imaginary. So I'm excited to talk to her. Her first book, You're Gonna Die Alone and Other Excellent News, came out last fall. She's currently working on a novel that explores how we learn to be loved, how we find the love we deserve, and what it means to change, all with a healthy dose of kilted Scottish men. That's kilted ? And after a few of these, I'm trying not to say quilted Scottish men. Witty banter and a heroine worth rooting for. So that is next month's guest. So thank you for being on our program, Frank.
Right here. Well, thank you.
Cheers.
Prost.
Gross.
Hey, and here's to the 4th of July right there. That's we're in Pennsylvania here. That's where it started.
Yes, excellent.